Hi, it's Janet Fitch, and it is noon on Wednesday. So this must be Writing Wednesday, where I deal with your writing questions. We talk about craft, we talk about inspiration, we talk about despair and having to, plow through that and all the things that lead to writing. I am happy to take your questions in the comments, and if you want me to design a Writing Wednesday around your writing issues, um, uh, send them to me at my website, janetfitchwrites.com. So welcome to Writing Wednesday, and I'll be watching the comments and answering questions live. So welcome. And today I thought I would talk about a book I'm reading right now, which is Steinbeck's Journal of a Novel. I don't think it flips, but anyway, Steinbeck's Journey of a Novel. We are on the road to get some work done. I'm reading my whole novel, first draft, going through and seeing what it needs, which is work, lots of work. I'll show you what I'm doing with it, what it looks like. So I'm going to turn the camera around. So it looks sort of like that. Yeah, yeah. First draft. Hi, Amy. First draft is going through the novel and just seeing what you got, because I don't go back once I've kind of locked in a chapter. I just keep going. So the end of the first draft, or towards the end of the first draft, as I'm closing in on the ending, which has to be the proof of the pudding. And one really cannot write the end of a novel without a really good sense of what the thing is about. So this is where you start raising the Titanic, where that, which means looking through the water, you see this big shape under there, and you start pulling it to the surface. Like, what the hell is this about? I'm somebody who doesn't necessarily know what a novel is really about until I get to the end of the first, at least to the end of the first draft. As I start working on the ending, hi Ruthie, as I start working on the ending, or approaching the ending, then I can evaluate whether the stuff that I have in the book supports that. Does it, unless you know what it's about, you don't know how to end it, what it's really about. So I've had to get away from LA, I've had to get away from home, I've had to get away from phones and just my regular life, read the whole thing, and then I can see the shape of that big boat that's under the water, which is nowhere near the surface at the moment. It is not anywhere near. So what I've been going through is pulling out whole sections, whole subplots. What I do is, everybody knows that I'm a big ring binder fan. So here's the ring binder. This is my novel, as it is. And what I've been doing is taking the sections that don't seem to have any bearing on anything, don't build the meaning of it, and putting them at the end. So if I find a way to work them back in, if I find a way to work them back into the story, knowing what the story is about, if I can use that extraneous material, or kind of tangential material, and work it closer to what this book is about, I can use it. If it just doesn't have any bearing on the central story, out it goes. The way I work, I invent things. I'm inventing, the characters are just popping out. That's just me. I invent characters. Invent. But then when it comes to what is this thing about, then I have to go through all that invention and decide like what fits. It's like making granny squares for a blanket. You make out of all tons of different yarn that you have, say, not that I'm a knitter, but crocheter. But you have all these granny squares, and then you decide, oh, well, this is going to be a granny square. This is going to be a blanket that's going to be, blue, blue, green, and purple. And then you have all these yellow and orange squares, and you don't need them. They don't fit, they don't go, and you didn't know that when you were making it. You didn't know what your decision was going to be. So what I'm doing now is pulling out the granny squares that just I don't need. And if sometime I can, if I get to the point where I can use some of that material, I haven't thrown it away. I just put it at the end of the binder. I like ring binders, as everybody knows, because I like the flexibility, and I'm a very physical person, so I like handling paper. Even though I wrote it on a computer, to read it, I want to see it on the page, and then I just really rip through it, make notes all over it, and then I will probably type this from scratch, because typing it from scratch or writing by hand, you think twice about inserting unnecessary material, because you have to type it all over again or write it all over again. So I recommend that. I know very few of you are going to take that advice, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. So what I want to talk about today, so Ruthie says, I cut stuff too, put it at the end, hoping to use it later, but then I'm over it. That's right. People say, do you ever use that material that you've taken out of your books? And I never do. I'm over it. The book has re-knit itself into its new form. You've taken the Titanic and it's come up, and you don't really need the croquet set after all. You didn't need you didn't need the stable scenes, because there's no stable on the Titanic. So you decide what you need, and then usually you end up building other. But you might need something, you might want something. I've taken out a point of view character that was very good. Hey, Janine. I've taken out a point of view character who was very good, but it was drawing energy from my central character. I talked about that last week, I believe. And so I'm putting her in the back. And if I find that the book will accommodate that, I'll put it back. But at the moment, that's at the back. That's been eliminated. So what I'm reading right now, it mirrors the experience that I'm having. We were in Port Townsend, Washington, a week or so ago, and my husband is a writer and very good in a used bookstore. We went to there's a fabulous used bookstore in Port Townsend, Washington, and he bought me Steinbeck's Journal of a Novel. And what this is he was given by his editor, he was given a very nice big format journal to use. And what Steinbeck did was write a letter to his editor on the left-hand pages every morning before he started work. And on the right-hand pages, he wrote East of Eden. And so it's a journal of the writing of East of Eden, which is a magnificent book. It's probably his magnum opus, even though everybody knows The Grapes of Wrath, because it was a better movie made out of it. And it's always, it's read in high schools and stuff, the story of the Great Depression. But East of Eden is a big book, and it's a magnificent book. And it is told in parallel streams, one every other chapter alternating. And one of the streams is the story where the author has a voice and is able to express his own opinions and his own attitudes and stuff. And the other is the story of the fall. It's the story East of Eden. It's the story of Adam and Eve and their kids. And it's a riveting book. And I think the movie is good. There's some miscasting, but, what do you do? It's 50s. But it has him talking to his editor about... The editor doesn't see it, and he doesn't tear the book apart. He's going to deliver it all at once. But he talks about every day before he writes as his warm-up, instead of looking at email, making phone calls, and et cetera, he sat down and he wrote a short letter to his editor about his plans for the day, for the book, for the day, and his ideas about writing at the point of writing East of Eden, where, many of his major works have already been published and lauded and stuff. But he got the Nobel after this book. And the things he says, I both recognize the amazing, similarities of going, of the day-to-day task of writing. It's really inspiring. I'm starting to do it every day, to write about what you're planning to do that day and your ideas about writing and stuff. Very short, it's a paragraph or two every day that he did, but way worth reading. One of the things he wanted to do was write the book very slowly, because he wanted to give the appearance of a natural flow, natural progression of life. He said, let's see if I can quote it, I wrote it in my journal. He said, let's see, it must be written at its own pace, not pushed too much. Quote, otherwise the warp shows through. When you weave, the strings that go this way are the warp, and the weft, and you build along the weft. The warp is stationary. But he says if you go too fast, people can see the form, they can see the setup, they can see the structure they can see through the artifice of the writing and the tale to the strings behind it. And he didn't want that. He wanted a picture like this tale would just emerge organically, and so he didn't want to reveal too much. There's also a great where he's talking about this. I didn't underline it because this was a beautiful edition that he gave me, but I couldn't help noting some of the things. And one of the things I really liked was talking about how much you put in and then what the reader sees. So he talks about the Trasks, which is Adam and his sons, and the mother, Eve, who is not on the location. They fascinate me. I know them so thoroughly and have gone into their ancestry. I know their moods and impulses better than I know my own, surely better than my own. It's probable that my own would be a mystery to me if I inspected them at all. So his own motivations and stuff he doesn't go into. So he uses the characters, right? About the natures of the Trasks and their symbol meanings, because this is East of Eden, this is Genesis. I leave you to find out for yourself. There is a key and there are many leads. I think you will discover the story rather quickly for all its innocent sound on the pages. Now, the innocent sound and the slight concealment are not done as tricks, but simply so that a man, a reader, can take from this book as much as he can bring to it. It would not be well to confuse an illiterate man with the statement of a rather profound philosophy. On the other hand, such a man might take pleasure in the surface story and even understand the other things in his unconscious. On the third hand, and I have three, your literate and understanding man will have the joy of finding the secrets hidden in this book almost as though he searched for treasure. But we must never tell anyone they are there. Let them be found by accident. I have made the mistake of telling my readers before, and I will never make that mistake again. You will notice my methods of trying to create the illusion of something that really happened in this book. I think it can properly be called not a novel, but a history, and while its form is very tight, it is my intention to make it seem to have the formlessness of history. History is not formless, but a long view and a philosophic turn of mind are necessary to see its pattern. And I would like the book to have this quality. This is something that I think is really interesting. If you are a literary writer and you are really putting a lot into, say the crafting sentences, touching on myths, touching on, all kinds of things that I always have believed that a book can be read on two levels. He talks about three, but I say two. I want it to be people to be able to read it just for the surface story, just for a good story. The average reader, it doesn't, people have wondered about that. The average reader does not necessarily have the breadth of associations that maybe I do, or my characters do, or some of my readers do. And if it's a good story, it doesn't matter. If the language is beautiful, the average reader, I think, like Steinbeck is saying, will take it in on an unconscious level, will understand that it's beautiful, even if their eye doesn't go to it, that they will sense it as they're reading, that they're reading something that's beautiful and well crafted, carefully written, vivid, that will all come through. But the literate, the careful reader, the more sophisticated reader will actually notice what you're doing. And it will be that much more exciting. It's like going to see magic. And you have people like me generally who just watch the magic and we go, wow, that guy is magic, We don't wonder how it's done. We just like, wow, that's amazing. But another magician will look and go, wow, that was amazing. They know how it's done. Or sometimes, they don't even know how it's done. But they're figuring it out. And you write for both audiences. You write, hey, Sayward, you write for the careful reader, the sophisticated reader, and for just a good story that hangs together for the average reader. I just love how Steinbeck doesn't struggle to work, but he comes to it with a number of different moods. That he's very accepting of his moods. He's not saying, oh, I'm too depressed to work, or I'm too excited to work, or I'm not working well, or, he accepts it all as part of the workday. So we went to a party Saturday night, had a good time. Sorry to break the writing rhythm, but I have to take some time off or it will poison the manuscript. I know you will understand that. I am not too bright this morning, but will start the week just the same. I don't suppose writing consists in anything more than doing it. I am breaking pencil points today. He has to have his certain kinds of pencils, and he has like a couple dozen, and he likes a really sharp pencil. So when it becomes blunt, he gets another one, and then keeps going. It doesn't say who sharpens his pencils. I am breaking pencil points today over vehemence. This is usually the thing that happens first before a connection is establishes. But there isn't any doubt I will get my day's work done. I'm sure of that whether or not it be good. This is not a morning of great joy for some reason or other. I don't understand why some days are wide open and others are closed off. Some days smile and others have thin, slitted eyes, and others still are days which worry. And it does not seem to me to be me, but the day itself. It has a nature of its own quite separate from all other days. And this is one of mild worry, not about anything. It goes casting about for something to worry. It can always settle on money, and usually does. And then there's lots of sound in the house that day that are irritating. But it's so interesting to read about a great writer's day-to-day writing experience. And I wonder if it would keep I'm starting to do it, keep me more focused with my day if I start by talking about my day and writing and how I'm feeling and what I plan to do that day. And then he also sometimes writes a little bit after he's finished, but he writes more about his feelings as he's sitting down to write, what he plans to work on that day, how he feels about his book, his characters. And it really allows him to get deeper than probably he would have gotten if he'd just gone directly to the page. And he worries that he's maybe would die before he finished the book, which we get to. I don't have that at the moment because this is a first draft. But as you get to the end of the book, I find I stop wanting to go anywhere. I bring my manuscript with me everywhere. I am terrified that I'm going to die or get in a terrible accident or something before I can finish the book. So it's interesting that Steinbeck has that as well. It's just fascinating to see how he thinks of writing. Like here's the story stays in the back of everything else, meaning the back of his mind, no matter what he's doing. No matter what I do, the story is always there, waiting and working, kind of like a fermenting mash out of which whiskey will be made eventually. But meanwhile, the mass bubbles and works and makes foam, and it is very interesting, but the product that is wished for, devoutly to be wished for, is the whiskey. All the turmoil and boiling is of no interest to anyone except him, because that's what he's writing, is the mash out of which the whiskey will come. And I think it's so interesting to, instead of journaling after or talking about why you're not writing or, various other self-analyses that journals can be, to journal about a bit about the book before you start the book, but about the book, about writing. So it's a fascinating journey. I'm fairly early on. He talks about what he's been able to get into the 1,000 words that he's written today. I'm trying to hold it down to 1,000 words. I always have this tendency to hurry, and I don't want to this time. I want this book to be a very slow one. I think he wrote it in at least he got a first draft in a year. So it actually was not written that slowly, but he's giving himself permission to write slowly and, really take time with the details. Hi, Pedro. Thank you. And part of making it slow is that the kind of book I am writing should contain everything that seems to me to be true. There are few enough true things in the world. It would be kind of sin to conceal any of them or to hide their little heads in technique as the squeamishness of not appearing in one's own book. This is the authorial voice. He's giving himself permission to use the authorial voice in alternating chapters, not in his main one. But for many years, I did not occur in my writing. But this was only apparently true. Yeah, right. I was in them every minute. I just didn't seem to be. But in this book, I am in it, and I don't for a moment pretend not to be. But it goes very slowly today. Sometimes I think I like it better this way. I am really mumbling over the syllables. And sometimes that is good and pleasant. We're talking about the music of language, and you have to say it out loud to hear the music. And that's what he means by the music of the syllables. So writing by hand is a whole different deal, and it slows you down. I haven't done it in years, but I do it when I'm stuck. I'll take a yellow pad. I have certain materials I always use. So I'll use a yellow pad like this, and I might write a section by hand. And the people I know who write by hand tend to be more careful with language early on. I don't use it because I don't write by hand much because I can't really see what I've done. It's something I do in a crisis when I can't see anything. I'll write longhand, but he writes longhand the whole time, mumbling over his syllables. If I still don't get anywhere, that's the way I'm going to keep it. And his poor editor, of course, is looking for some product to sell, and he knows it, but it's like for him, he is such an artist that the commitment to producing what he thought was going to be the great work of his life needed the time to do it. And I think it doesn't hurt us really to think that of every book that we write, that this is going to be the great book. It could be the last book you write, So you really want to put that kind of effort into it, that when people read it, it's like, is this going to be the greatest book of my life? Each book you try for it. You try to hit it out of the park. I mean, I do. Let's see if there's any more. I've just started this, so there isn't that much to whiffle through. Luckily, he has a wife who handles everything else, and I don't have a wife. My husband is about as capable of handling everything as I am, which is like about the same. So we both need, we could both use a tender assistant who would handle everything, but nobody's going to do that for you. So luck of the draw. And he definitely divides the inside world of his imagination and his writing from the outside world of everything else. I now regard the book as the inside and the world as the outside. And just as long as that is so, the book is firm, and the outside cannot hurt it or stop it. I must be sure it remains that way by never letting time go by without working on it. He's starting to write on the weekends. He was going to take the weekends off, and he's starting to think, I just need to write a paragraph to keep it going, which I think is something that most of us have figured out, that we need to do that to keep the book inside, keep it awake, keep it alive. when you're writing it. It has to be tended to. And he's like talking, that you don't need a ton of action at all times, to remember to balance the action with the interiority. And a kind calm, calm events, small events can have big roots. So he's saying the book does move along, it never moves back, but it lacks tension, and that is just exactly what I want and intend for it to do. It may cause trouble to you, the editor, as publisher, because people have grown to expect tautness and constant action. It's like in the present day theater. If there isn't shouting and jumping around, it isn't liked. For people seem to have lost the gift for listening. Maybe they never had it, who knows. The admired books now were by no means the admired books of their day. I believe Moby Dick, so much admired now, did not sell its first small edition in 10 years. And it will be worse with this book. It will be considered old-fashioned and an old hat. And to a large extent it is. You have to look closely to see its innovations, even though there are many. In pace, it's more like Fielding than Hemingway. I don't think the lovers of Hemingway will love this book. But he is going to write the kind of book that he thinks the subject matter deserves, and is willing to chance that people aren't going to like it, that people are going to think it's an old-fashioned book, because he's somebody who came of age in the 30s, which is an era of realism. And in fact, Hemingway wasn't one of the major writers at this time. It was the Holy Three were Fitzgerald, Faulkner, and Dos Passos. So that's interesting. Hemingway came a little later in popularity. But anyway, it's so interesting to read a little bit of this every day, and also to write a little bit of this every day about my own work. So enjoying that. So I wanted to share that with you and recommend it. Steinbeck's Journal of a Novel. And recommend this to you novelists out there. It's a really way of centering yourself in your work, rather than letting the outside world come in and break in. Especially summer, everybody's out there. I'm on an island right now, and I'm looking out at people on their boats and stuff. And it's like, what am I doing in here working my butt off when people are out there on boats, dying of boats and stuff? And it's like, yeah, well, they're not novelists trying to get a novel together. I will go out for a walk, in the evening and enjoy the weather a little bit. But, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to detach from all the distractions that I normally allow to lasso my time, and read this book and start raising the Titanic. It's a difficult task. I did have a question that was sent to me through my website, so go ahead and feel free to do so. This is a question from Deborah. I don't know if you are with us, Deborah. I wrote a memoir that a few agents raved about, especially the narrative arc. But they all say they can't sell memoir unless the author is famous or has a huge following. Maybe, maybe not. But that's what, her memoir, they felt would not sell unless she had a bigger name. So, this is the market, and it has its own reasons. I heard this so many times that I gave up and rewrote it in third person as a novel. I sent it to one of the agents who loved it and says the novel reads like a memoir. And she says, I wonder if you could speak to how novel structure differs from that of memoir. in one of your Writing Wednesdays? Okay, this is a terrific question. Why can't we take a memoir, put it in third person and call it a novel? Well, I have a friend who was wanted to write a book about her relationship with her mentally ill son. And she was not a writer. She's an artist, and a very accomplished artist. And she wondered whether she should write a memoir or a novel. And I said, you're not a writer. People will read a story written by a non-writer if it's nonfiction, because the story is so compelling and the emotions are so compelling and the situation is so interesting that we'll forgive a lot in a memoir if the story is good. The novel is about the writing, the quality of the writing, the pacing, the heightened reality of fiction, the ability to pick and choose, the ability to shape events, to maximize the meaning, where a memoir doesn't have to do that. So this is an agent who loves the novel but says it reads like a memoir. I don't know if that was a rejection couched that way, because the agent loved it. Says the novel reads like a memoir. I would say that comment means that it's not quite as shapely as a novel would be. That there's material in there that's more, and then this, and then this, and then this. So the difference between a novel structure and that of the memoir is that, and memoirs can do this too, a well-crafted literary memoir, but you're crafting a build of emotion and casting your scenes to around a theme, which you don't know until you're doing what I'm doing often. Just reading it from start to finish, going, what the hell was that about? When you're writing a memoir, you're telling it the way it happened often. Whereas a novel, it's like, what resonant scenes build a meaning? What seemed to start sending out little nets between them, like the layer of fungus that's under every living biome, the mycelial layer. They're all little mushrooms and little fungus, and they knit the forest floor together, hold water so that other things can grow out of it. I think that the difference between them, and I don't read a lot of memoir. I've read some that have just been incredible, that could have been novels, but there's a directness to the memoir. I'm just telling you this is what happened. To the novel becoming or a memoir becoming a novel is ejecting elements that are undramatic, using dramatized scenes, which you often don't do in a memoir quite as much. If it's in third person, then you use the tools of third person. You could pull back and look at that character, and then you come forward and be that character. And I wonder whether Deborah is doing a lot of focus pulling. Has she discovered that yet? As a technique, to look at third person technique and see the difference between that and memoir. You can tell in a rounder way in a more complex way about the backstory of why we're like this. Um, there can be more kind of tangential, unfinished scenes. Like I can think of memoirs that I've read that it's like I wanted like another 50% in that scene. I wanted to know more about that character's feelings. I wanted more confrontation, more unpacking of the material. You know, memoir can sometimes seem a little thin, but it doesn't matter because this is the story. The person's trying to tell you a story, whereas a novel is inhabited. Not this is what happened to me and then I did this and I did this, but what did I think? Often you don't remember what you thought, but in a fiction you can't skip over that. You have to inhabit, the character has to think about it. You know, and it doesn't have to be the way the person who experienced that actually experienced it. You write for the page rather than just relaying what happened. You take what happened and you turn it into art. And you don't have to do that for memoir. I mean, some people do. Some people's memoirs are as beautiful as their fiction, but usually not. You know, there's novelists whose memoirs that I've read, and I just thought, I like her fiction better. You know, her fiction is more explored and more beautiful than this. You can take, in fiction, you can take an event that, say, some schoolyard bully, you know, kicked sand in my face when I was 7. I can take the emotion of that schoolyard bully situation and put it in a high-rise, corporate high-rise, so that I take that emotion and the depth of the emotion and the type of interaction, but put it in a more dramatic adult situation and really use it and build on it. So you know, if you try to move into fiction, you have to be willing to break open the material and change things that aren't that dramatic. Be willing to change it into art. So Sayward says, I'm in a similar situation with my book not selling. My agent loves it. Publishers she submitted to loved it. Nothing but praise, but they're not confident that they can sell it. It's been on submission for 18 months. Too commercial for literary, too literary for commercial. Some days it feels hopeless. Yeah, too commercial for literary, and most of them, there's something else. You know, I don't know if that means it needs to go in the blender more, because more, you know, the best writing, the best fiction, in my mind, is fiction that works on both levels, that works on the commercial and the literary. So if the commercial aspect, which means the surface story being compelling, is impeded by language, say, that the average person isn't going to enjoy it, then you're striking out on the commercial level. And if it is maybe too exaggerated in its twists and turns for the literary reader, then you impede the literary reader. So that's an interesting problem. You know, do you simplify language and technique to emphasize the thrilling aspects of it and the superficial story, the surface story, or do you take out the improbable and emphasize the literary aspects? You know, this is the kind of thing that we all struggle with. and there's no one answer to it. Everybody, has had these confusing things said to it, said to them. I mean, I've had things that, so your video keeps freezing. It could be me. I'm on an island and I'm only getting as good a reception as I get here. MJ says, perhaps next time, love to hear a perspective on reading novels in translation into English, emerging structures, approaches, especially newer works in the past 20 years. Oh, yeah, and that's a couple of different questions. The translation, works in translation, which this is a golden age of translation. More and more work in translation, translators being acknowledged, Americans being more willing to read books written by people from other countries, more curiosity about being part of the world. This is the golden age for translation. Emerging structures and approaches. In the past 20 years, I mean, the past 5 years have been incredible for new structures and approaches. And, that would be a whole Writing Wednesday right there. We live in a very fractured time, so people are extremely interested in hybrid works, poetry / fiction / memoir / what have you. There's so many genre bending works. I loved Any Man by Amber Tamblyn. I think there's at least 8 different techniques used in that, from confession, interview, podcast, text, email, phone message, minutes of a meeting, just an incredible array of techniques. So we live in a time where people are very interested in form. So you're seeing a lot of hybrid forms. I'm somebody who really, when I go to a movie, I always like to be in the movie. Like I would sit, when I was a kid, I would sit in row 4. So I wouldn't even see the edges of the screen. Like I wanted to be in the movie. And I'm still like that. I appreciate the formal experiments of some writers, but I'm not tempted really to go in that direction. I'm very physical, and I like the physicality of writing a prose that's where you're in the body of the character. That's kind of my project, but that doesn't mean it's not super interesting. So Sayward says, publishing has been a very interesting journey so far. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, can I put a spike through my head? It's not fun. It's not fun to finish your work and then try to find the person. It's like dating. It's like looking for the one and beautiful relationship and going through kissing a lot of toads. Now let's see how we're doing on time. Oh, we're doing very well. All right, so I challenge those of you who are working on a novel to maybe journal just a little bit about the book, not about the barking dogs next door, or not about, the problem you're having with the bank or your daughter or whatever, but what you plan to do today, what is the section that you're going to be working on, what you like about what you're doing, what you're trying to do, what your project, what you're trying to do with the book, and just as a way of reminding yourself that you're a writer first, and try to stay in touch with that for sure. So it's good to see everybody. Is there any last minute questions? I would be happy to answer. And otherwise, we will see you next week for Writing Wednesday. All right, thank you. Bye.